Which city?
North Carolina, just north of Charlotte.
Okay, awesome. Hello, everybody. James Swanwick here from Swanwick Sleep. Nice to have you here. If you are watching on Facebook, if you're watching live on YouTube, if you're watching on the replay later on, thank you very much. Please do go ahead and post your question. Anything you have about sleep, go ahead and post your question. Say hello to us. In fact, if you're just joining us, why don't you start off by typing which city and state and country you are actually watching from. And we are joined on today's show by the lovely Tara Youngblood, who is the co-founder and CEO at Chilipad, which is a company that I have invested in, and more specifically, their wonderful product, I think it used to be called the Chilipad, but maybe it's called something different now. Tara, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. We can clarify.
Yeah, because we're going to be talking about sleep today. How was your sleep last night? I was just curious, like how was your sleep and what was your sleep practice?
Yeah, it was okay. I have to admit it was a Saturday night, so I went out with some friends and had some drinks, which isn't good for my sleep, and I know that it isn't, but every now and then, especially now that we've opened up a little bit, it was really nice to go out with some friends. So I didn't have an awesome sleep. It was okay. The Chilipad actually really does make a difference on that, but my resting heart rate definitely went down later than it would have without the alcohol.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. My sleep wasn't great either. And the mistake I made was I went to sleep too late, knowing that I was to get up early in the morning. Where I am doing this at the moment is in Brisbane, Australia. So I'm in the future. It's tomorrow where I am. And I knew that I had to be up at 6:30 because it's 7 a.m. here. And I didn't get to sleep until sort of after 11:30, closer to midnight. And I was up at about 6:15. So it was and then, when you got to get up a little bit earlier, you kind of like, for me anyway, I don't quite get into that deep restorative REM phase sleep. So the irony of this whole thing, Tara, is that we're both somewhat sleep experts and we're both coming on here with pretty average night sleep.
Not being able to brag about our night's sleep. Yep. That seems very difficult. I have the same thing. I'm thinking about going live. Like inevitably something happens and I don't get great sleep, but.
Yeah. Tara, you're the co-founder and the CEO at Chilipad, and you're the author of Reprogram Your Sleep, the sleep recipe that works. You're a speaker, and you've been on TEDx and spoken at the National Sleep Foundation Sleep Show. I've seen and hung out with your wonderful husband Todd a couple times at some various sleep exhibitions around the place, and I'm the creator of the Swanny's blue light blocking glasses, so I'm somewhat of a sleep expert. And I think let's just touch on the first thing that you mentioned before we get into science and technology and sleep, because you are the creators of the Chilipad, which I want to ask you about and dig into. But the first thing you said was talking about alcohol. Let's talk about the last thing to do, the last kind of like few hours before one goes to sleep at night, and the first few hours after someone wakes up, because I think I believe the biggest leverage that you can get in your sleep is what you do in those last 3 hours, and very much what you do in the first 30 minutes of the day. So why don't you speak to the last few hours and also maybe the technology of sleeping throughout the night, and then I'll talk to first things in the morning.
Sure. Yeah. So I always base it on Clifford Sapir out of Harvard was the first one to coin the term, but you want to be able to flip that sleep switch. And there actually is a switch to turn on and off, and it's unconscious. The good news for both of our companies is it's light and temperature are the two things that are sort of our unconscious mind is looking to release the melatonin naturally and all those hormones that help us get to sleep. So, one of the things you want to do is create that framework so it's set up properly to turn off your switch, because it's a whole lot easier to flip that switch for sleep if you've kind of done, like you said, that last 3 hours is really important. In our modern world, we like to have a bigger dinner, and we didn't really evolve that way. Lunch was much heavier, and we tend to want to stack that before dinner. But keeping food and alcohol out of those last 3 hours really helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, when you have food and alcohol, your body's got to digest it and break it down. It's got to go to work, and we don't really want it to go to work, do we? We want it to go to rest. We want it to go to sleep. And people who are clinging on to drinking the alcohol certainly always try to argue with me, and they'll say, "Oh, but having a glass of wine helps me unwind at the end of the day, and it helps me fall asleep." And my response is always the same, which is, it is true that the alcohol may make you drowsy and may help you to fall asleep. However, the quality of your sleep will be severely compromised as a result of you drinking that alcohol. And the same with food, isn't it? Because if you eat within the last 3 hours, your body's then trying to break down that food.
Yeah, so it is really, in America anyway, I don't know what the statistics are for Australia, but a majority of Americans use alcohol to fall asleep. It's actually a pretty common problem, and what it steals from mostly is your deep sleep. So that's where I talked about my resting heart rate not going down until closer to morning because I had a drink. That's where if your body wants to get cooler, it wants to be able to settle into that deep sleep. And if your metabolism is going quickly, you'll actually be hotter. A lot of people that are tracking that temperature will realize they're actually hotter that night as well from the alcohol.
Yeah. And I mentioned before that I was going to talk about what to do with first thing in the morning. Well, actually at nighttime, obviously we like to encourage people to block as much artificial light as possible. So we encourage people obviously to wear a pair of blue light blocking glasses. This is, Swannies from our company, Swanwick. Because every time you're staring into a screen like this, you're tricking your body and your brain into believing that it's daytime. The light is actually stimulating your pineal and pituitary glands, and that suppresses your body's ability to produce melatonin. And then first thing in the morning, I always encourage people to get as much natural sunlight as possible. Our skin has receptors in it. And when we stand in front of a window and let the sun come in, or go outside for just even like 2 or 3 minutes, and we let the sunlight hit our face or in my case, hit our bald heads. And
Todd as well. You have similar haircuts.
Yeah, we hit our skin. It tells our internal body clock, our circadian rhythm, oh, this is daytime. And so our body wants to flood itself with daytime hormones and start to cortisol starts to rise. Obviously, we don't want a lot of cortisol throughout the day, but in the first part of the day, our body's very high in that. And we're wanting to just trigger okay, this is daytime. And then, about 12 to 16 hours later from that, the body, knowing what time wake up was, because it's got the sunlight on it, is then going to start to prepare for sleep again. So
it goes back to that sleep switch that I talked about. Again, you and I are both in that same thing. And for a lot of people, temperature is consistent in their house. And so there is no temperature change. But just like you want it to get dim because the sun's going down, you also want that temperature to go cooler in your house, or trigger it by going outside and walking outside if it's cooler outside. So those same things, when you flip it off and then when you flip it back on again, it's the neurons, it's a clear mechanism that's what it needs to do.
Yeah.
So, we're seeing some night shift workers come in. We've had a lot of conversations about that. I don't know about you, but we did a 1-for-1 with the COVID to healthcare workers, and they are notoriously on shifts and not having great sleep. And so, we've had a lot of conversations about how to shift your circadian rhythm. We kind of talked about understanding and knowing when that clock is. You can shift it when you travel, like if you're going to Australia and you're going to flip it around. But it is possible to kind of retrain your body to shift and do that same pattern of on and off, despite what time of day it is.
Yeah. If you're just watching, you're just joining us, please do leave a message or ask us a question in the comments below, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. So we talked a little bit about some simple natural things we can do. As natural as putting on a pair of glasses is obviously at nighttime. But you have a wonderful product that I have used. When I was living in Venice Beach, California, for about 18 months or so, I used it. You were kind enough to let me have one of your wonderful products, the Chilipad. So just tell me a little bit about how that uses science and technology to help people sleep better. Why don't you just explain what it is, what's the concept behind it and how it helps people?
Yeah, so it really is all about those temperature triggers that we talked about. So at night when you're asleep, your body is trying to drop 2 degrees by your core body temperature. That's inside. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about your heart and lungs getting 2 degrees cooler, that actually has to put a fair amount of heat. And the thermodynamics of that aren't that complex if we were to not have blankets on top of ourselves, if we didn't have that squishy comforter and mattress and foam and all that packed around us. All of that actually insulates that heat and makes it very difficult to shed that. So when we talk about sleep, we want to have at least neutral to cool to be able to enhance and enable our bodies to drop those 2 degrees. So what our product does is it kind of works like a radiator for your body. So if you think about your car engine, you have a radiator to keep it cool. And if you didn't, it would overheat. Your body needs that at night as well. And so we really have these water coils that go throughout the mattress, and it maintains whatever temperature you set it at. So we do have the Chilipad still, which is remote controlled, and it's kind of like your traditional thermostat where you set it and forget it and that it's one temperature. But then we also have the Ooler, which allows scheduling. And if you think about it as a smart thermostat, so you can go ahead and, for me, I like to warm up to fall asleep, but then that's not really good for my body to actually get great sleep. That's part of that recipe that I discovered. It turns out what makes me fall asleep isn't what keeps me asleep or really helps my sleep. So I have to get cooler once I fall asleep. So that's what it enables you to do.
It's a pad that goes over the mattress, isn't it? And now it's to the point where you can actually have a cool side and a warmer side. So if you sleep with a partner who likes cold and you sleep with a partner who likes slightly warm, you can actually have each side of the bed be different temperatures. Is that right?
Yeah, because Todd, I think, would sleep on a slab of ice if he could, and I like it cool, but not quite that cool. So anywhere south of body temperature, which in the US is that 98 and everywhere else in the world is 37. But as long as you're sort of south of that, you're actually still enhancing that cooling. So you can actually set it pretty warm and still be enhancing and mitigating some of that thermogenesis that's happening at night.
There seems to be a general consensus that in Fahrenheit, 65 to 69 degrees Fahrenheit, a cool temperature seems to be the optimal temperature for sleep. Is that your understanding, somewhere in that range?
Yeah, so the problem about throwing it out that way is it doesn't take into effect that thermodynamic environment underneath our blankets. It doesn't take into effect our metabolism, our BMI. It makes sense that someone with a high metabolism, or you look at our NFL linemen, football players here, those are big guys. They're going to put off more heat and have a different dynamic than a small child. There's a pretty wide variety of how much heat's coming off in the middle of the night. So, the biggest thing about setting that room temperature is you've actually, our comforters, what we put over top of us with our blankets, insulate us from that room environment. So it has to be actually pretty cool for that to translate. At that temperature, you're just mitigating some of the other factors slightly. But you're not really at a spot where you're enhancing sleep or optimizing that experience. And that's really where we're at, is under your blankets, where your body is maintaining that temperature and really influencing that equation. The room helps some, but you figure if you're covered up to your chin, the only ventilation is coming out through your head. And that's where a lot of people will flip their pillows and try to do that. Their head is trying to still vent all that extra heat.
Yeah. The best way I could just maybe describe what the Chilipad is it's kind of feels like a hot water bottle. When I was younger and when I was ill, for example, my mum might make a hot water bottle and stick it under my back or under my body. And then if you're, frightfully hot in the middle of summer, say, it might be a cool water bottle, right? It might be putting like an ice pack underneath your back instead. So you have that ability to be able to play with the temperature when you use the Chilipad. Yes.
Yeah, that's really the advantage. So we're not saying, go with no air conditioning or, set your room at 100 degrees, and this is what it is. It's really an enhancement for that. It's really mitigating and thinking about the temperature inside there. So whatever temperature you want, whatever your metabolism is looking for to help keep you asleep. And a remarkable number of people wake up in the middle of the night and use the restroom and think I needed to use the restroom and that's what woke me up. But a lot of times it's actually just that heat equation, because if you're actually in deep sleep, your body emits a hormone that will prevent you from needing to use the restroom. But if you're waking up, it's more of a side effect of habit that is saying, oh, I guess I'll use the restroom. But a lot of times it's heat that's waking people up, and they don't realize even a small amount of heat is going to push you out of deep sleep during that first half of the night, especially.
Can a small amount of deep cold also push you out of that deep sleep?
Yeah, it can. Deep sleep, honestly, you can really push a lot of limits. You don't actually register temperature too much when you're in deep sleep, when you're actually in that deep sleep cycle. What it is if when you come through those cycles, and if you're up in REM sleep, that's when you're going to trigger either warm or cold. And so if you're too warm, you'll just go ahead and wake up, or you're too cold, you'll just go ahead and wake up. But for most people, that first half of the night is, although you cycle through all those different kinds of sleep, that first half of your night as your body's trying to drop to its lowest point, that's really the zone of best deep sleep. And so that's why, as you mentioned, when you don't go to sleep when you're supposed to, that window just gets shorter. And so it's much harder to get that same quality of sleep if you've shortened that window. And you really have to be conscientious if you're going to shorten that window from 8 hours, how and why and what are you going to do to help mitigate that change of timing.
Yeah. If you are watching and you're listening and you are curious about the Chilipad, you can actually get 25% off using a Swanwick code. So if you just click on the link on the screen there, if you want to go to chilitechnology.com, but we've actually put a direct link straight there. And if you use the Swanwick code, which is Swanwick25, you will be able to get 25% off. I have used it. It's wonderful. I recall using it both in, I first started using it in summer, and then I ended up using it in winter as well. So in summer I had it run cool, and then in winter I had it run warm, obviously. So that was lovely. Mel here asks, do you recommend drinking cold water before sleeping?
So, a lot of this will depend on you as a person. So Tim Ferriss, for example, prior to using the Chilipad, would use an ice bath. So, a real extreme part of that. But, drinking cold water will help some, but you need to think about over the course of the 3-4 hours after you fall asleep, your core body temperature is going to drop. So just a cold water may not be enough to really indicate that. But that cooler shower will do that. For some people, warming also, because it's all about that change of temperature. We're looking for some sort of change in temperature to trigger that sleep switch, certainly as part of falling asleep.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Mel. Thank you. We've got Bianca who's watching on Facebook. And Bianca on Facebook says, I can't get through the day without naps. It ruins my bedtime. Should I avoid naps?
I'd say if you're really driven to do naps without being like shift work, or, when you're a true night owl, you can get away with it a lot more. But if it ruins your bedtime, then that is definitely something where you want to try to push and try to keep that sleep where it should be. I'm actually a big proponent of naps in general, but it's about making sure you get if you're struggling to what you are, I would recommend at least tracking your sleep and being able to have a sense on what kind of sleep you're getting during those naps. Because there are shift workers that will use a polyphasic and they will take naps because they have to, but then they have to be conscientious of how much quality sleep and what kind of sleep they're getting, and being balanced in that approach still.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question, Bianca, over on Facebook. And if you're just watching or you're watching on the replay, go ahead and type your question in and we will do our best to have it answered for you here. And just a reminder, if you click on the link, there is a link there to Chili Technology where you can use the code Swanwick25 for 25% off. We're talking to Tara Youngblood, who is the co-founder and chief executive officer at Chilipad and the author of Reprogram Your Sleep, the sleep recipe. So 8 hours sleep a night, is that a myth, or is that super important? Is that the most important thing over the quality of sleep, Tara?
Oh, I love that question. It is one of my favorites, actually. So 8 hours is absolutely something that came about as part of the industrialized world. Prior to that, we actually slept in multiple phases, at least two, depending on which culture you came from. So it's actually because we became driven to have work at start and end at a specific time that we had a drive to have sleep exist in a particular grouping. And so it is one of my pet peeves, and I think very damning for a lot of people, that 8 hours is the one and only sort of holy grail. It's more, for me, I look at, when you look at a 20-year-old, they're getting 2 hours of deep sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep. That's a good balance. It's a good amount of either of those types of sleep. And so if you can, with the Chilipad, for sure, using blue light glasses, flipping the switch, timing it, you can actually get that in 6 hours. It is possible. It's just about being very succinct and making sure you're doing it right. Todd, as a night owl, actually doesn't tend to sleep 8 hours, but he does do a nap, and he loves his power naps. So a lot of it is, it's all possible, and I think it's very individualized. I think it's a good benchmark of, if you're not sure, start with 8 and making sure you're waking up, and you shouldn't feel tired in the afternoon. You should feel rested if you've spent 8 hours in bed. But if you're spending those 8 hours and it's not feeling good and you're restless and you're waking up, that means you need to start breaking down sleep and look at, well, what is my recipe to get good quality sleep? Yeah,
so interesting. Just a clarifying question, with your products, Tara, what is the difference between the Chilipad sleep system and the Ooler sleep system? Is there a difference?
Yeah, so the Chilipad is the remote control. It's sort of that standard thermostat. Set it and forget it. A lot of people just love that simplicity, and they're not doing a lot of changes in their sleep. So throughout the course of the night, they're going to pick that one temperature, and they're good to go. Chilipad is absolutely that. The Ooler is kind of our next evolution. It has an app. It has scheduling. It self-cleans. So it has a UV light. It has multiple fan speeds. So depending on what you think of white noise, you can adjust that, and also be able to adjust it as far as boost its performance or have it in silent or somewhere in between. So it's kind of just that evolution of being able to take it to the next level. Yeah.
So we actually have a 15% off code for that as well on the Ooler sleep system. It's just in the comments there. If you use the discount code Swanwick15. So the Chilipad is the OG, the original gangster, so to speak. Mm-hmm. That's the one that I used. Or you can use the ramped up model, which is the Ooler sleep system, and we have a code there that if you use Swanwick15 for 15% off. What about caffeine, Tara? What are your thoughts on people who drink cups of coffee before they go to sleep each night?
So I love that question as well. Todd is definitely one of those people we met in college, and he would have a full pot of coffee and then literally go to sleep. Now, if I were to do that, I'd be wired into next week, and that is not how I work at all. But there is about 5 to 10% of the population that their caffeine receptors basically don't work, and they don't work like they do for the rest of us. So caffeine for most of us really should stay, again, outside of that bedtime window, but there are definitely people like Todd that it doesn't matter at all. So again, that's one of those things that I hear when I give talks a lot. They'll hear certain tips and they're like, well, that tip doesn't work for me, so I threw them all out. It's important to keep in mind that not all sleep tips, not all health tips are going to be applicable to you. You really have to kind of A/B test and figure out for yourself, yes, this is definitely something that triggers me. And for most people, they either know, yes, caffeine is it. And if you have a cup of coffee in the morning, you're going to feel it. Or if you don't feel it, then please use other tips to make that recipe work.
Yeah, we in many ways we can generalize, but then there are always unique cases, or there's always a percentage that it's personalized health, right? Like we can say blanket statements like you should eat lots of vegetables and you should limit your red meat intake. But then there are people out there who just do the caveman diet and eat nothing but red meat, and all of their markers seem just fine. Yeah. Whereas other people who eat less red meat have, get very high cholesterol and,
Yeah, I had a great aunt, and I swear she was firecracker, and she smoked and drank and, lived into her 90s and was a firecracker till then. So all the metrics that would say, ooh, don't do that. There's always going to be exceptions to that. It is all about you finding and, kind of the language of being a CEO for your own body and understanding, yes, this is what works for me, or that is not it. And even between light and temperature, you'll find that there's tons of people that are very sensitive to the light. They should absolutely be using glasses, and possibly all day, just to manage that. It's not even just a bedtime thing. And yet temperature is very similar. There's a lot of people that that's definitely a big issue for me.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that I should go out, buy a pack of cigarettes, buy a 6-pack of beer, get some McDonald's, get a McDonald's Happy Meal on the way home tonight, and crawl into bed around 12:30 because I'm the exception to the rule.
Ooh, I'd cross your fingers really hard and hope that your genetics is that 1 in a million that is going to make that work. And if it is, God bless you. But for the rest of us, it doesn't seem to work. But again, there's always exceptions, and that's why it's important to really, really own your recipe. Yeah.
We've got one of our Facebook viewers right now, Sharif Soror, is saying LOL, laugh out loud. Sharif is thinking, why would you eat a McDonald's? Burger King every time. All right, so we are talking to Tara Youngblood, CEO and of Chilipad, and author of Reprogram Your Sleep, the sleep recipe that works. And we're talking about how to optimize your sleep quality using science and technology. Anything else that you might use to, maybe any other technology just besides the Chilipad or the Ooler that you use to optimize your sleep or have used in the past, Tara?
Actually, the big part of my recipe goes back to, again, starting the day, flipping off that switch. I mimic the idea that if you go outside in the morning and get that outside, I call it the stress monster, probably because I have 4 boys and I've had to explain this to them over the years. But you wake up in the morning and the stress monster is good. He helps you get going. It's part of what gets you moving. But if he gets really big throughout the day, and right now there's a lot of stressors out there between pandemics and everything else that can be pushing you. Every time you look at social media, that ups that stress monster. And by the time you get into bed at night, if that stress monster has grown throughout the day and you haven't squished him down to keep him nice and manageable, that's where a lot of people will be struggling to fall asleep, that racing mind, all of those kind of things. And so, it is about getting the endorphins of going outside. Dopamine is a good response to that. Get stuff done, make a list, accomplish something. Even in weird times, you can still say, I did this, I made my meals, I got my bed made, all those little things, do that list. Another great one is oxytocin. It's my favorite because I have teenage boys, so I make them give me 5 hugs a day. That's a good other way to manage stress, even in quarantine. Who's ever in your quarantine team, we still need to touch each other and connect. All of those are easy ways to help keep that stress monster managed. But that's a big part of my recipe. Breathing, gratitude, meditation, any of those things you can do to keep that stress monster. He is not friendly to sleep.
Yeah. I have a gratitude journal here, and I write down 20 things that I'm grateful for each morning. I got pages and pages of things that I'm grateful for, and that certainly helps me throughout the day. I tend to do it first thing in the morning rather than at nighttime, but there's no reason why you couldn't do it at nighttime, just as a reminder of what was great about today, because all too often, speaking from my own experience, sometimes I'll get to the end of the day and I'll have a little bit of stress. I'm pretty good. I'm not a high stress person, but sometimes, maybe last night actually, I had a little bit of stress. I think I was working a little bit too late and thinking about the week ahead. And then when I go to sleep, my mind's working. And then as soon as I wake up, I'm thinking about about work. I think I'd like to change that. I think I will commit to change that. What do you think, Tara?
Yeah, I love it. We started a habit that came from the boys when they went to summer camp, and that is, what was your daily good for the day? So what did you do to sort of give back? What's some small thing that you contributed? What was your highlight of the day? And what were you grateful for? And so those are our 3 questions that we close the day with when I'm tucking them in. And then honestly, they usually ask it back, which is really great. And be able to have that conversation of, yeah, this turned out it was a really good day. Because when you reflect on almost every day, we're very blessed in our world that we can look back and say, yes, every day there was something to be grateful for, something that I did was good. And that helps settle that mind a fair amount.
Elena Frederick over at Swanwick is saying, I hear you, Tara. I have 5 boys, and that stress monster is pretty big. Morning routine is so important. I also avoid media to help with self-care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, putting rules around that is pretty important. Especially, it just sucks you in, and it generally doesn't do good stuff for your stress monster at all. Getting sucked into all of those issues. Trying to, a lot of the phones now have given you like screen time and being able to keep track of that. So it's, I would set, good goals for yourself and try to continue to be, when did I use my phone? When was I on electronics? And did I keep it in the windows that I wanted to, or did I sort of sneak in? Binge watching Netflix is a really hard one, especially you get stuck and it's like just starts the next thing. But it is really important to try to keep that certainly out of that bedtime window, and to try to mitigate that taking over a bigger chunk of time than you want it to.
Yeah, I find it's been challenging for me to pull away from consuming so much media. I used to be a newspaper reporter. I used to be a magazine reporter. I used to be a television host. And so I was, I spent the first almost 20 years of my professional life in the media. And now that I'm out of it, I still like to observe it. However, I have noticed until recently that I slipped into a overconsumption of media, overconsumption for me. And it's frightening how challenging it is to pull away from media. Just this kind of habit of going to news sites and looking at the latest stories of the day and and watching people's outrage over certain issues, and me feeling outrage over people's outrage on super issues and politics and things like that. And then it's so prevalent in today's society, even when you just catch up with family members or friends, that everyone wants to talk about the news of the day, and so you get sucked back into it. But on those occasions where I have limited my media exposure, I have definitely felt the correlation of increased happiness, or if not increased happiness, certainly reduced stress and anxiety. Has that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to really create, again, it's really easy to get sucked in, same sort of things. There's always stuff going on, answering questions or whatever. And then you're down a rabbit hole, and suddenly you've lost time and you're more stressed. So it really is, I have to create pretty strong rules for myself. Otherwise, I end up at the end of the day, again, with that big stress monster staring me in the eye. And then it's harder. It's not that you can't overcome it. I do use yoga nidra and breathing exercises. So, if you do get to that bedtime window and you're absolutely stuck, it's not to say you can't unstick it, but it sure is a whole lot easier if you're managing it throughout the day instead of kind of hoping at bedtime you can make it work.
If you have sleep questions, go ahead and post them in the comments here below. We'd love to answer them. I've got Bianca here asks about decaf coffee. She says, can't live without coffee. Spoken like a true coffee addict. Bianca, decaf. What do you think, Tara?
Yeah, I think, all of those sort of things, I'm a big proponent of balance, whatever that is. So if you can't live without it, try to find a way to do it. But it's kind of like sweeteners versus real sugar. And you can get really into heated debate about sweeteners and, trying to fake it because you're not willing to give up that sugary soda or that drink. And, it's all about picking the habits and the habits you feel like you want to change. So if coffee is affecting your life, then probably it should be targeted as something you want to look at or consider. But if it's not, and decaf works, and you've got other things on your list you're working on, that's where there shouldn't be sort of that damnation part that goes with health and wellness. It should be, whatever path works for you is really important. So if you've got your decaf and you got your coffee routine, go for it.
Yeah, whatever path works for you, go for it. But I would offer that McDonald's and smoking and beer and all that kind of stuff is probably not really working for you. I mean, everything that we know about those things is like you overdo that, it's probably not going to work for you.
No, unless you're Aunt Winnie, probably not. Probably not.
I have someone on Facebook here, Pictorial Lane. I quit smoking with the help of a patch. Any chance of a sleep patch happening?
Yeah, actually, there are some sleep patches. I'm trying to remember the name of the brand. They're very similar to supplements. It's just a way of dosing the supplements. So I'll try to, in the follow-up notes, try to remember the brand for that. But there are some sleep patches. There's some great sleep supplements out there. But I would also encourage you, again, they're generally a mix of a bunch of different environments. Melatonin, it's way healthier to wear those blue light glasses or use temperature. Use your body's natural triggers to try to get it first. That is by far the better way to do that. But, melatonin, especially with jet lag or as you're trying to reset something, isn't necessarily a bad thing, or even some of those supplements. It's just at least my opinion for me, I try to do it every other way before I put anything different in my body.
If you're joining us and you would like to test out one of Tara's sleep devices, which is the Chilipad or the Ooler system, we do have some discounts there. So there's 25% off the Chilipad if you use the code Swanwick25, and we've got a link in the comments there. And if you would like to try the Ooler system, which is the fancier version, then the newest version, then we have a code there that says Swanwick15. If you'd like to follow Tara Youngblood for some more sleep tips ongoing, Tara, you can follow her on Facebook at sleepgeek.me. That's facebook.com/sleepgeek.me. And of course, as always, you can grab a pair of Swanny's blue light blocking glasses from our Swanwick Sleep Store, and follow us on Facebook at Swannies by Swanwick. And there's a link there in the comments as well for anything that I just referenced. Okay, who we got here? Someone's asking on Facebook, I'm curious about the genesis of Chilipad. What's the story behind the technology? So we touched on that a little bit, but why don't you just touch on how this came to be?
Yeah, well, it's really fun and multi-generational if you consider that Todd's uncle invented the water bed. And then Todd and I have brought lots of other products to market. So Chilipad was honestly a natural market niche we saw when people were coming out. Tempur-Pedic, Select Comfort were adjusting pressure in the bed, and at the same time microclimate control in cars of driver and passenger being able to adjust the temperatures differently. Todd and I, as I mentioned, both sleep very different temperatures, so we were like, yes, let's put this in the bed because that makes absolute sense to us. Honestly, we thought it was much more about those comfort metrics, kind of matching to pressure, matching to like adjusting it in a car. It turns out, very similar as we talked about, that light and temperature actually talk to your unconscious brain. And so the beauty of temperature or light is, unlike a diet where you're like, okay, I have to have willpower. And even as you put those glasses on, it's not like your brain, you have to think through it. You put your glasses on or you set your Chilipad, those type of things, that's unconscious. It's talking to your hypothalamus that regulates your heartbeat. You don't suddenly stop beating your heart when you're not thinking about it. It's in that same part of your brain, which is pretty magical. And that is amazing. But we didn't know that when we invented it. It just kind of came across, the science kind of came along at the end of it, which is a really good perk, frankly.
Yeah, love that. Love that natural evolution. Well played. Well done, Tara and Todd. And well done, Todd's uncle.
Yes. Yeah, you can look him up as Charles P. Hall. It's the 50th anniversary of the waterbed. So if you ever had one, it's been 50 years since it first came out.
Wow. Elena was saying, hey, I love using herby tea as a coffee replacement, naturally caffeine free, and often you can use that one, helps with sleep and relaxation, which is great. And Elena is also saying, Tara, do your kids have any sleep routines? This is one of our household struggles as they get older and want to stay up longer, way past when their old parents can stay up.
Yeah, so this is absolutely a big issue for me in the U.S. There's multiple reasons why our lifetime expectancy has actually been decreasing, and unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with under 25. That suicide rate is going up, and the anxiety for our kids is terrible, and they're attaching it to this lack of sleep. And it's not to say that if they don't get one night's sleep, they're going to be suicidal. But that long-term trend of not getting good sleep is very harmful for them. Their brains are still developing, especially that prefrontal cortex, all the way up to the age of 25. So there's a real need for them to get good sleep. And electronics, whatever that form is of TV and phone and that social for them, is a huge driver. Gaming is really big in our house. We have two guys that live and breathe, and it is absolutely have had to create rules around it. I'm obviously very neurotic about sleep, but one of the things that all of my boys use now, I started using it and then they kind of came along. We do have a cooling and heating weighted blanket, but I will say that weighted blankets is a great way when they say, I'm not tired, I don't want to go to sleep. Tucking them in, even at the 15, 16, 17, literally the 17-year-old can't sleep without his weighted blanket. Makes it sound, he's 6'2", so he's not like this little guy. He's this big guy. He's probably, good thing he's not on Facebook watching me. But weighted blankets can be a really big lift for them as far as reducing that spin that they're going through and stopping that racing mind. It's a great hack for them. But anything you can do to try to keep their bedtime, they need an enormous amount of sleep in order to keep growing that brain and that prefrontal cortex. That ability to make good decisions is really all forming, and we need to give them good sleep to continue to form that properly.
How does a weighted blanket work? I must admit I haven't dug into this. Like, what is it about something that's a heavy blanket? Why does that help you sleep?
So it's the deep pressure. It was originally started for children with autism, and they went through sort of that deep pressure therapy. But it releases serotonin. So when you have deep pressure, and again, serotonin is one of those things that helps you sleep. It helps reduce anxiety. It helps balance that stress monster that we've been talking about. But it is amazingly magical. It is kind of like I talked about temperatures, like, shouldn't be really that easy, but it really is that easy to reduce stress and anxiety, just putting something heavy on you.
Yeah. I like that. Something heavy on me. So it's probably not as comfortable as putting a whole bunch of bricks on yourself then.
Bricks would be less comfortable. I would definitely start with a blanket before bricks. But my dog loves the weighted blanket, so now I end up with like the dog and at least one cat also on there. So they've added extra weight to my weighted blanket regime.
How does your chronotype impact deep sleep? And your chronotype refers to your body's internal clock. So maybe you could just clarify or just elaborate on that a little bit and talk to that, Tara.
Yeah, so chronotype, I think, is one of the best pieces of health information, easy to get, but it is so empowering when you understand how that works. It works beyond just sleep. It works in everything. And it makes sense that any machine, the computers we're on, they all have clocks inside. They all are sort of run by that mechanism of a clock, and your body does too. And it's driven by genetics. Your PER3 gene drives it. You can influence it, like we talked about with that shift, but it is driven whether you're a morning person or a night person or somewhere in between. And it is a pretty broad spectrum of what that is. There's a way far morning and way far night, and lots of people in between. But you can take a chronotype quiz online. We have one on our website. We can include in the show notes. But when you understand that, it tells you when that bedtime window, that switch timing really helps that. The reason you want to time your sleep to match that, and even your nap, because there is also a dip in the afternoon. But again, we talked about that core body temperature dropping. All of your mechanisms are geared towards that. So again, when you flip the switch off properly in the morning by getting outside, saying it's officially off, I'm done sleeping, I'm moving on with my day, you start towards that drive to sleep, and you're looking to flip it on. And knowing that window means that you've just emphasized your recipe. You've just amplified that result by doing it right. And for deep sleep, again, that window starts when you go to sleep. And it doesn't matter if you've decided to stay up late like you did. If your normal routine, if your body's looking for going to bed at 10 o'clock and you go to bed at 12, unfortunately, it just means 2 hours less of that deep sleep window. It just makes it much harder to still get deep sleep, because it really wants to be in that first half of the night when your body temperature is dropping. REM sleep is usually happier as you're warming up, and you can get better REM sleep. It is one watch out with the Chilipad. If you get too cold, and that's where the Ooler helps, if you warm it up, you'll actually help your REM sleep in the morning. So that second half of the night, you're emphasizing REM. But it is very temperature driven, and it helps, but timing is everything. The power of when you do stuff really does matter.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up as we head for home, Tara. I want to kind of just close out really with how we would sleep like a superhero. And what I mean is, like, you know, generally speaking, what's like the gold standard of sleep from when you wake up in the morning and the actions you take or the actions you don't take right up until you go to sleep, and then, you know, hopefully sleep, you know, many hours of beautiful, deep REM restorative sleep, so you wake up in the morning feeling nice and refreshed and restored, unlike both you and me today, obviously, as we admitted at the beginning of the call. But interesting for different reasons, right? Like, so your reason was you had a couple drinks with some friends last night. My reason was I went to bed later than I ordinarily do and got up slightly earlier than I ordinarily do. So let's start with let's start with the morning. So first thing in the morning, and I'll kick this off, what I suggest if we're doing a gold standard of sleep is try to get as much natural sunlight as possible. I know I just touched on this a few minutes ago, but first things first, let the sunlight hit your skin, tell your body's internal clock, your circadian rhythm, this is wake up time. And that is going to help you fall asleep and prepare for sleep later on at night. Over to you, Tara, what's next?
All right, so this is where I have to give the credit to BJ Fogg and Tiny Habits. It's a great book if you've never read it. But his philosophy is there's tiny habits throughout the day. So when you're looking for that perfect sleep recipe, it is not in grand gestures. As you said, it could be just getting some sunlight on your skin is enough. So think about what you're doing throughout the day. One of his great analogies is on average, a human being uses the restroom 7 times during the day. And what I try to do, even in quarantine, to sort of, I love my kids, but take 1 extra minute in the restroom and breathe for that minute. Try to do less in than out, whatever works for you. Box breaths, there's multiple different breathing techniques, but, you know, throughout the day, manage that stress monster in all the ways that we talked about. Try to have your heavier meal at lunchtime, all of those kind of things. If you're a morning person and you're going to work out, try to do that earlier in the day. You know, all of those habits build towards that bedtime. And then cutting off caffeine in the afternoon and cutting off food and alcohol that 3 hours before you hit your window is part of building that ideal day towards sleep.
Yeah. I think studies have shown that you want to cut off your caffeine within 8 hours of sleep. So if you're going to go to sleep at 10, no coffee after 2 p.m. I mean, I have a blanket rule. I just don't drink coffee in the afternoon. If I have coffee, I mean, I go months and years without drinking
a lot
coffee.
of it's to think of the half-life, right? So part of it is people like, well, why do you need to cut it off? It's really because that is how long it takes to get out of your system where it's not going to have an influence on your receptors. And so that is part of understanding that that's how long it takes your body to dump that caffeine effect entirely. Even though you feel the buzz of the the caffeine immediately. It's actually that lift and that staying in your body still has an effect on your sleep, just because it takes that long to flush out.
Yeah, they've done studies, Tara, that show that people who exercise in the morning tend to sleep better as well. And they believe it's because of two reasons. One, because people who exercise in the morning tend to do it more as a habit, just like you referenced BJ Fogg there, the world's leading habits expert. When you're exercising in the morning, you tend to do it more regularly before life gets in the way. And people who exercise regularly tend to be healthier overall, which helps them sleep overall. And then also, because you don't want to sleep closer to bedtime because it raises your core body temperature, which we know is anti-conducive to a great night's sleep. So I like to exercise in the morning, not for everyone, but I certainly like to do that. That keeps me feeling healthy and strong, and I find that it helps me sleep at night. No caffeine in the afternoon. Gratitude, anything you can do to reduce stress and anxiety throughout the day. You came up with a few great things. One of the things you referenced there before about BJ Fogg, it's interesting. We use the bathroom, we flush the toilet 7 times a day. BJ Fogg actually has this system where you create a little rule for yourself. It's like, when I X, I will X and celebrate with X. Mm-hmm. So what you could do is, when I flush the toilet, I will think of 3 things to be grateful for, and I will celebrate by washing my hands.
Yes.
And now you've created a whole new habit. And if that's 7 times you're using the bathroom each day and 3 things to be grateful for, you've just knocked over your daily 20 things to be grateful for in a day.
Yeah, his philosophy is just magical that way. It isn't, and he has a great I think new emotion called Shine, and it's a great sense because when you think of you being proud of yourself or whatever, but that moment of like shine, and he'd say that it can be as simple as throwing that paper towel and hitting that basket. You have a moment of like, oh, that felt good. That feeling reinforces habits. So anytime you can attach that little bit of shine, that little bit of reward, that little bit of feel good at the end, that just reinforces those healthy habits, and it feels good.
Yeah. And then, of course, at nighttime, block as much blue light and artificial light as possible. Our bodies weren't designed to be subjected to all of this artificial light, especially at nighttime, which disrupts our sleep pattern. So wear a pair of the Swannies blue light blocking glasses. There's a link in the comments here below or wherever it is where you can go and check out our range of blue light blocking glasses. I'm wearing the classic pair at the moment. And then certainly try out the Chilipad and the Ooler system, which Tara and her husband Todd have created, which can control the temperature of your sleep, or the temperature of your bed, and therefore your body's temperature as you sleep throughout the night. And we've put a link up there, just a reminder that if you'd like 25% off the Chilipad, there's a link there. And if you'd like 15% off the upgraded Ooler system, there is a link there as well. Let's do just 2 more quick fire away questions here. Question is coming from Melanie. Says, my kids don't use thick blankets, but they can't sleep without at least 3 pillows under their heads. Is there any harm in letting them do that? I try to take one out when they fall asleep, but they wake up.
No, I think it's really interesting. They're actually, that you're seeing it in some of those adjustable beds. Actually, for people that are snoring, having a little bit of incline can actually help. And actually, we've had one of our boys has asthma, and when he would get congested, we would absolutely prop him up because it can help you breathe. It doesn't really hurt them. So as long as they're not doing anything funky, but kids are magical. You'll see a baby sleep like, frankly, arms head over heels, backwards, upside down, just about, and they're still sleeping fine. So sleep is sleep, and what feels good is generally the right thing. If you're getting good sleep, it's right, probably. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Tara. I so appreciate you joining us here and for your words of expertise on all things sleep. Where can we follow you on social media? I think you have a pretty cool Instagram page, right?
Yeah, so I think that looks like they're popping up on the screen there. You can also find my book on Amazon. I think every book in the world on Amazon just about, but you can find my book, Reprogram Your Sleep, there as well. And if you're not much of a reader, the TEDx talk kind of gives you the cheap version in about 16 minutes. So just go to YouTube, TEDx YouTube channel, and you can get the cheater version that way.
Yeah, and there's some links in the comments here below where you can follow Tara on Twitter, and a link to her book, and you can follow her on her Instagram and on her Facebook page. We got the young boy behind us. He wants to insert him. He wants to be a television anchor. You want him to be on the show? Come on, up you come. Let's go.
Oh, hello.
There you go.
I'm very boy friendly. We had between 4 boys, and then we always seem to. Todd teases me. I collect lost boys, so I've been a foster parent and had other boys over the years that have come to live with us. So I tend to collect boys. I'm not sure why. I don't have a problem against girls, but for whatever reason, they end up on my doorstep. So.
Well, Elena Frederick from Swanwick Sleep likes to collect boys as well. So between you two, you could run a whole boys commune, I think.
I think so. Actually, I dream of retiring and having a farm and goats and like total natural experience. And I keep thinking that it'll be a good place to collect boys that will just show up.
Well, Tara, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your expertise. I so appreciate you. And yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a great day.
See you later. Bye.